So chapter 12 is actually being delayed just a little bit longer, but that's okay. There's still a lot of content to talk about. So today I want to talk to you guys about George Pig. Now, I've been debating on if I wanted to talk about this at all, but the suspicion has been raising a lot since the bonus chapter that we got, Distorted Memory. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about George Pig and how George Pig may play a part in chapter 12 and maybe something we notice in chapters 10 and 11. Also, to let you know that I am going to be randomly picking some people out of the comments and giving them some Robux. All you have to do to enter is just like this video and subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on Instagram if you like. A link to that is down below in the description, but that's all you have to do. We also have a plushie as well if you want to pre-order that. A link to that is also down below. But with that being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy. And today we're going to be talking about George Pig and chapter 12. Okay, here we go. So one thing I want to talk to you guys about is the Distorted Memory chapter and how this has something to maybe do with chapter 12. And I'm also going to be looking at your comments and also the Piggy theories in my Discord that we have, where you guys are able to drop down your predictions. We're going to be checking that out towards the end of the video. But let's go ahead and talk about George Pig, what we know, and what we may possibly think about George. Now, there's been this big skeptical, feeling about George, like, is George evil? At first it went, George being missing, then George was behind the dumpster, then we find George, which we all have some sympathy for George because George is kind of the one that managed to escape and things like that. But in the Distorted Memory, which I actually don't think that the stories will actually align, like I don't think the Distorted Memory chapter affects the storyline that much. I think it just kind of helps it a bit, but it doesn't play such a big part in the storyline. But what we'll do is we'll talk about if it does, but my personal opinion is that it does not play a huge part in the storyline. So with the Distorted Memory chapter, if you did not complete it, basically George is looking for Penny, and Penny turns out to be the big sister. Now, a lot of people have been saying TSP stands for the Sister Piggy, or the Sister Penny, or the Secret Piggy. So that's also something too. It's like everything is starting to match with TSP. The 6 piggies, the 7 potions, it's the sick potatoes. A lot of things are starting to line up on what TSP could actually be. The super potato, we cannot forget about the super potato. But let's take the theory that George is actually evil. So after you beat the Distorted Memory chapter, George has a scene where he kind of turns evil and then he wakes up. Now, I personally think that this is just George being just kind of traumatized of what's going on. He knows that the family was acting weird already. Like he saw that, they were infected. He managed to get away, like they weren't the same when they came back. So he kind of knows what that looks like, and I think his biggest fear was turning into that. Not saying that he is that and he can control that, because that's a big theory that, let's say, hypothetically, that George is infected and somehow immune to this and can control it, and he can actually go, from being infected to non-infected, like just at a drop of a dime or just thinking about it. Then that would change the whole dynamic of things, because another thing, let's say George is evil, okay? We'll talk about if George is evil and if George is not evil. So let's say George is evil. Then we have Zizzy's sisters to worry about. And again, the way Pony also asked, like, George in the end of chapter 11, like, hey, aren't you supposed to be watching the sisters? And George is like, yeah, I mean, I just convinced them to play a game of hide and seek. But what if something has happened to the sisters? What if, George, convinced them to play hide and seek, but maybe he actually kidnapped them or has them, hostage, or maybe killed them. Who knows? That's if George is evil. That could possibly be the worst thing that George has done. Or let's say George is behind everything. But from what we know is, again, who knows if, he has done something to the sisters, but hopefully not. And it was just a game of hide and seek, but I think hopefully we'll find out that a little bit more towards the end. I mean, he does go with you to see Mr. P as well. And if George is innocent, then I think we're all in the clear. I think it just sticks to the storyline that George is missing. He really wants to know who hurt his family. The Mr. P kind of theory thing is still out there as well. I don't know if Mr. P's arm looks like a key. I'm gonna be looking through the comments, but let me know if that's possible. I did see some renders or character versions of the Mr. P, and the arm kind of looks like a key. So I'll maybe get into more detail about that and look into the character, and maybe we can talk about something with that in the future. But again, I don't think the storyline of Distorted Memory has too much to do with it. I don't think George can control being evil and not evil. But again, let's say Minitoon decides to say, okay, you can control the infection. That would also, you know, everybody's thinking that Bunny, if Bunny's not dead, then Bunny could also control the infection as well because of her eye. So yeah, it's just one of those things as well. But what I want to do is I want to take to the comments and see what you all think about George Pig, the sisters, and just predictions on chapter 12. I'm really excited for it. I do want to let you know that Minitoon did say that he has some news about chapter 12 just before we get into these comments. So he did say that the good news is that we're going to get a new game mode, and without a doubt, it's going to be the most entertaining. He said that's going to be arriving after chapter 12. Now the bad news is that he needs to delay chapter 12 because he's actually moving houses. So, which is very understandable, and I think everyone is pretty much understanding of that. I mean, they work so hard on these chapters, and life is still life. So, yeah, there we have it. But let's go ahead and roll to the comments and see what you all think about George Pig in chapter 12. Jamie Garcia says, now the ending was shown. George Pig is infected, but you know how he says no, not no. Well, I think he switches back and forth. I think, you know, like when he said that, you know, he was sad and convinced his sisters to play hide and seek. I think he did, but after he turned like into a monster and he's infected and likely murdered them, and now the sisters are infected, and also Giraffe, Molly Mole. And remember the missing poster in the gallery that said it had red eyes? Well, probably the last sighting of him was likely, oh my goodness, I just thought about that. Remember when we had that poster? Sorry to cut off this comment, but remember we had the poster of George, you know, having, you know, last seen being red eyes? That could explain if George is infected and can kind of control it. So yeah, and also at the end of chapter 11, they continue on to say that he goes with us to fight Mr. P. I think chapter 12, he will turn evil and try to kill us. Wow. David says it was called Distorted Memory, probably dreaming about that memory that he had. So it was probably chapter 12, George turns evil. Oh my goodness. Flying Tiger Gang says George can turn on and off evil mode basically, but he can't control it. His missing poster said red eyes, meaning he was seen in evil mode. I think he turned evil and killed George in the safe house. Maybe he can't remember that he does it, or he said not now. I think he might turn and try and get you. One last thing, I think that those eyes are the bad part of him waiting to control his body. Sorry for such a long comment. I subbed, username BoXR. Buddy, that was not a long comment at all, and I appreciate you dropping that theory by. And the red eyes he's talking about is red eyes in the backyard of Distorted Memory. If you look up in the sky, you will see red eyes. Sinister X1 says the red eyes in the garden could be George's evil side watching him, possessing him every time. So George infected a lot, probably because he turns infected over and over. And the way Penny runs away instead of getting George means maybe works for Mr. P. Ooh, this is getting good, guys. Let's take to our Discord for the Piggy theories. And Barry says, theory: George is infected by the 7 potions. The people who got infected by the potions are Peppa, Mommy Pig, Daddy Pig, George, Teacher, Doggy. Foxy Barry did not get infected because there's no proof. That is true. 371 says, 1. I feel like Mr. P didn't do this to hurt anyone. I feel that he thought the potions would do something different, but ended up going wrong. That's why George said, my family started acting weird after we got back from the hospital. 2, there's a second way to get infected, and that's why the game mode infection. 3, George Pig and many others are immune to getting infected because George said, my family started acting weird when they got back from the hospital. Why would his family be infected but not him? Wouldn't Mr. P or whoever did this infect the whole family? Very true. So maybe George was actually with them, and then maybe, yeah, George is somehow immune to it. Wow. And I think that's gonna wrap it up for the theories. But what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add a poll in this video, and I'm just gonna be just straightforward and say, do you think George Pig is evil? yes or no. And I look forward to seeing which you actually vote, and also if you've subscribed to the channel as well. But that's gonna wrap it up for the video. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, if you did enjoy, feel free to leave a like and share it. And if you want to show your further support, you can always use star code BIGB2 when purchasing Robux. And I will see you all in the next video, and I look forward to reading all your predictions and theories in the comments. Bye!